up just on a daily basis.
I think he was a formal person, and I think complex maybe. Somehow he'd been injured as a youth or a child. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know. But he was vulnerable. He was sensitive. He had been hurt. One felt sympathy for him in many ways because he was seemed so fragile in certain ways. He had unfairness. After all, when he ran for president, that presidency was decided in favor of Kennedy by a vote that was obviously, by any measure, corrupt in Illinois and in Texas. Although I was actually in favor of John Kennedy as the candidate, it was not. It was not a fair election. And so he had been bruised and injured by all of these
Because he was very, very smart.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many things that Nixon has done, which we'll go into just a little bit, that, that it didn't come out on television. Yeah. Kennedy had this young, he was vibrant, and Nixon kind of had a dark, it's almost like, in cowboys, the old cowboy TV shows, the good guy wore the white hat, the bad guy wore the black hat.
Came off very, very much that way, and made blacker by his critics, and he was quite aware of it. But the thing is that he carried with him these hurts and these disappointments, probably to a greater degree than most people did, and then others who sought his favor and thought to advance under him would play to that and try to use these. Were clever and tried to use these experiences to their benefit. I'm afraid that happened quite a lot.
Did you ever meet him personally?
Sure, of course, yeah.
So you had it. You're on a one-to-one. What was his relationship like with Henry Kissinger? Because I know Henry Kissinger, to me, was brilliant, and he was able. His foreign policy. We have so much that he did. He ended the draft, I believe.
Nixon did. Yes.
Nixon did. He ended the draft. In fact, he was also for universal health, which I was when I was doing research. Before I have anybody on my show, I try to do a little research, and I was shocked to hear because he's Republican. And he was really, for universal health. And I think and he was it was during the Nixon presidency that the Supreme Court issued Roe versus Wade ruling. And he believed in certain cases of rape, abortion was an option. And his wife, Pat Nixon, was very much in favor of, she was a spokesperson for her support on legalize abortion. And I'm reading all these things and I said, wow, I had no idea that was under his administration.
Yeah. And there are other things that seem inconsistent to some people, not to me, but he created the Council on Environmental Equality, EPA, was formed under Nixon for environmental protection. And there were examples after examples of things we don't associate with our general picture of him because of Watergate or or maybe some preconceptions in some cases. But so these things are complex. There are many things that I'm very proud happened during that time, and there is Watergate, for which there was no excuse or apology, and it's a mixed bag for all these people, isn't it?
It really is, because President Nixon did so many positive things. Nixon witnessed the first large-scale integration of public schools in the South, and being a Quaker, he felt that racism was the greatest moral failure of the United States. And
nuclear weapons, in which we had for the first time a reduction of nuclear arms, a treaty with Russia. No, it's a very rich period of time, and worth study in as unbiased a way as one can bring to it, for accomplishments in all areas, and called by a writer at the time, Nick von Hoffman, writing for the New Republic, American's last liberal, if you can imagine that being applied to Nixon. So
Yeah,
it's worth.
he
It's
seemed,
worth.
he seemed like a liberal.
He's worth a second look.
I almost, when I'm reading all the wonderful things that he did, he almost sounded like a Democrat.
Yes.
He didn't sound like the Republicans that we know. It's a different,
But-
both of you and I are independents.
No, it's
and
fascinating.
we discovered we are independents.
It's fascinating. I mean, not liking the guy, if you don't like him, that's okay. But to have that keep one from studying further about what he did seems to me a mistake. He had as an assistant before I was there a young man named Daniel Moynihan,
I remember that
later
name.
known as the most liberal of liberals.
Right.
And what they had in mind was, and proposed to the Congress, was a minimum income standard for the country. So you wouldn't need welfare. There would be a minimum income for everybody in the country. Radical, and liberal by any definition. And the Congress voted that down. There was opposition to it from unions, from whatever, saying this wasn't enough money for all sorts of reasons. It was voted down. So it's worth, as I say, it's worth a second look, as all of history is.
Right. I mean, nowadays he wouldn't be. We would wonder if he was a Republican. I mean, the standards that they have today, it's so different than they had. I mean, he was one of the first people that went to. He went to the People's Republic of China, and he ushered in Chinese-American relations. And I mean, it was just, wow, I'm just getting notice that we only have 2 minutes left, Neal. I can't believe it. I can go on and on and on. I have so much information here. But before we go, if we get back to President Nixon, and, I'd like to invite you back on my show again when you have time, because I know you have the busiest schedule I have ever, I mean, in order to get a lunch date, I think I'm going to have to do July or August of next year.
Not July, but August is fine.
Oh, August is fine. We met at the International Visitors. Maybe tell a little bit about the International Visitors Club, the center where we met, and that's where my last show I had the women from the Middle East, and found out that all Middle Eastern women do not wear burqas, and they wear suits, and they're lawyers, and they're businesswomen, they're CEO of companies. We have 1 minute, and that's where we met. And
I will agree with that IVCC is worth looking into. I think people have great experiences there in this program of citizen diplomacy, learning things that we're all surprised to learn, and I'm glad you're part of it and supporting it.
Yes, and that's where we met, and this is where we started. I was very impressed because I'm right now studying all the different presidents and what they did, and I'm going to a lot of the presidents' libraries. That is what I have been doing, and I'm learning about different presidents, in a deeper level, and I'm not taking what the newspapers or what the TVs are talking about. I have found so many different things that we do not, as people, our media, like we were talking earlier, our media has become the National Enquirer. And we have a couple of minutes, and I see where my names are going down, and I want to thank you so much, Neal. It was wonderful having you on the show. We are going to meet again. You're going to tell me when we can talk, and we're going to get a little bit more and get into more detail about President Nixon and anything else that we can talk about. You are so informative, and I've enjoyed our discussion, and I hope our listeners will learn a lot about the different concepts of the news and our president.